Ah, it is National Agriculture Day. Perfect. I can talk about something which is near and dear to my heart. The connection, the weird connection between agriculture, ownership, property. And it's very, very significant. It's the history, essentially the history of how relationships have come to be. What is the connection between the advent of agriculture and how relationships come to be? I'm going to enlighten you on that on this video. It's very, very important. In the advent of agriculture, when agriculture came to be, we no longer became humans that traveled in small tribes of no more than 150 people. In fact, science have proven and discovered that the human, because we've done it for so long, we cannot actually remember no more than 150 people. And because we've evolved to live in tribes. So we were no longer nomadic 10 to 11,000 years ago at the end of the Ice Age, at the advent, the beginning of agriculture. What happened? Well, when agriculture came to be, we no longer needed to travel all around the world just to look for food to survive. We can now stay in one place and have land and plant and farm. So ranching and farming came to be. And so we no longer needed to be traveling. So we went from a forced egalitarian society, traveling society, forced egalitarianism meaning forced sharing of things. We went from forced egalitarianism to now developing this new concept and implementing this new concept of ownership and property. Ownership and property didn't exist when we were nomadic. It didn't need to exist. It couldn't exist because we didn't own anything. So, with the advent of this, the ownership, and with the advent of agriculture, very importantly, listen to this, men needed to own their women. It was also the advent of men owning their women. Now, I know it sounds absolutely crazy and insane and terrible and horrific, but I'm going to explain to you why that happened and what I do to enlighten and emancipate people. And maybe you can do that first for yourself, and then once you've emancipated yourself, you can enlighten others. So it begins with this. Because we owned land, let me begin with this. Much in the same way as when you put seed into fertile soil and you get product when you harvest, when you put seed into fertile soil, you get product. You get it? You get an offspring. So because we humans had now land and property, which goes on and on and on for a generation, we never needed to leave it, it was very important for men to needed to know that their offspring were theirs, because they were going to carry on the family name and they were going to inherit the land for generations to come. So it's very important now for men to own their women so that they know that their children were their own. And in fact, this is where the notion that, and still even in some cultures today, only the firstborn child could be heir to throne. The reason why that is because only the firstborn child was the product of a conception from a honeymoon. I'm going to explain that to you in a little bit. So, to ensure that men own their women, they needed to implement laws to ensure that their women were their own and the women were their property and that their children were in fact their own. So they created these rules. First, they experimented with many different rules, one of which is having harems with harem guards and scimitars and their balls cut off so they can protect the women from other men. And so this never really worked because nobody would volunteer to cut off their balls to protect to be harem guards. They were also called eunuchs, eunuchs, eunuchs. And so they came to these rules that said, that came up, that resulted in monogamy and contracts of exclusivity. In other words, marriage, even though it was completely unnatural for men and women. Now, so they came up with rules such as the honeymoon, 1 moon, 1 month. The origin of that was that women were sequestered away from other men, so that the husband, after marriage, would be sure that if he had sex with her, and if she was demonstrably a virgin, then he knows that his firstborn child at least is his own child, and he can comfortably have parental investment and be heir to the land. So this is why virginity was prized for so very long, even though virginity has no merit. When you have sex with a woman, she's a virgin for the first time, but then after that first time, she's no longer a virgin. Wow, right? So she had to be demonstrably a virgin. How was that so? If she did not break her hymen and bleed on their first sex, then she was not demonstrably a virgin, and she would be stoned to death in front of the family's house. Brutal, I know. And this is how monogamy and marriage, even though, I want you to think about this. If we evolved, adapted to pair bond in nature with one person and be a nuclear family, which doesn't exist anywhere else, except for one type of ape, everyone else is non-monogamous and also non-nuclear family. But if we evolve to pair bond with one partner for our entire lives, then there would be no need for the word marriage. There would be no need for rules to ensure that we were with one person for the entire time. There would be no need, no emotion to stray. Do you see? And so what I've done for a handful of years now is enlighten and emancipate women from this bogosity and to empower them to understand these things, understand relationships, and you can begin to empower yourself and emancipate yourself by reading my book. And by the way, this is the original cover. Look at me, I was like 205 pounds. Read my book, Relationships 101, Forbidden Secrets of Love, Sex, Happiness. You can get it at book.jacksolomon.com. You can find out more about this, more science, evolutionary biology stuff, very intriguing stuff. It's only like 60 pages, very easy read. And you can find out more about this at book.jacksolomon.com, book.jacksolomon.com. So you can emancipate and enlighten everyone, men and women, so they can free themselves. Now, I'm not necessarily against marriage. I'm not necessarily against monogamous relationships. Some people are preferentially monogamous, and I have no qualms with that. I have no qualms with someone being married. I do have qualms. What I am against is somebody being forced into something that they don't want to be in. Why would you force somebody in geld? Geld means to imprison. Why would you imprison somebody to be with you if they don't want to be with you? If they're naturally non-monogamous. So it's very important to understand this, and to be able to communicate it, you must acquire reasoned confidence. And one of the aspects of reasoned confidence is having reason and having knowledge. You must know what the fuck you're talking about. So if you want to emancipate people, emancipate yourself, you must know what you're talking about. So to recap, agriculture and the advent of agriculture was also the advent of women's becoming the property of men. I want you to emancipate yourself from being property of anything. The truth is very simple. You create your own security. You are an emancipated and self-validated person, self-happy person. Happiness only comes from yourself. You are not owned by anybody unless you allow anybody to own you. And don't let anybody or any rules laid in front of you to force you to be property of anybody else. And then you will be free. You will be the arbiter of your own existence. And I want that for you. I want you to be a free choosing, free willing, self-validated, self-empowered, self-happy individual. The arbiter of your own existence.